He didn't call. He sent an email. 3 sentences, no greeting, no signature. The guest list is finalized. We've kept it very small. We hope you understand. I stood at my kitchen counter reading it twice, then a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder. They didn't. My son Marcus was getting married in 3 weeks, and apparently I wasn't going to be there. The coffee I just poured sat untouched. Outside, the October morning was doing what October mornings do in Tennessee, turning everything gold and a little heartbreaking. The maple in the backyard had gone fully amber. I'd planted it the year Marcus started kindergarten. He used to rake the leaves into piles just to jump in them. He used to do a lot of things. I'm 64 years old. I teach piano lessons out of my living room, 3 afternoons a week. I bake my own bread. I still wear the watch my late husband Raymond gave me for our 20th anniversary. I am not a complicated woman, and I have never once asked my son to be ashamed of me, but there it was. 3 sentences. We hope you understand. I didn't call him right away. I knew better. When Marcus was 17 and wrecked the car he borrowed without asking, I'd learned that calling in the first hour only made things worse. He needed time, and so did I. So I sat down at the kitchen table, folded my hands around the coffee mug, and let myself feel the full weight of what I was holding. His fiancée was named Dara. I'd met her 4 times in 2 years. Each visit had the texture of a job interview. Her asking careful questions, watching my answers, deciding something I wasn't privy to. She came from money, the quiet, inherited kind that doesn't announce itself, but shapes every room it enters. Her parents had a place in Nashville and a second one somewhere on the coast. I never asked where. It didn't feel like my business. What I did know was this. The last time I'd visited Marcus in Nashville, Dara had suggested, gently, over a dinner I wasn't allowed to help cook, that Raymond and I. She still said, Raymond and I, even though Raymond had been gone for 6 years, that we'd probably be more comfortable at a hotel than in their guest room. The guest room had been redecorated. New furniture. A color on the walls she called warm stone. It looked gray to me, but I didn't say that. I stayed at the hotel. I told myself it was fine. That was 8 months ago. After that, the calls from Marcus dropped from weekly to every other week to eventually once a month, sometimes less. I told myself he was busy. I told myself that's what young professionals do. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true because the alternative, that my son was slowly, deliberately building a life with no door in it for me, was something I wasn't ready to look at directly. Now I didn't have a choice. I kept the email to myself for 4 days. I didn't tell my sister. I didn't tell my neighbor Pat, who would have been furious on my behalf and marched over to say so in ways that wouldn't help anyone. I just carried it around like a stone in my coat pocket, heavy and private. On the 5th day, I drove to the farmer's market on the east side of town. It's the kind of thing I do when I need to feel like myself again. The smell of cut flowers and beeswax candles. The ordinary goodness of strangers buying tomatoes. I was standing at a table covered in late-season preserves when someone said my name. Margaret! Margaret Hale! I turned. The woman was around my age, maybe a few years older. Silver hair cut close, good posture, the kind of face that had been pretty for so long, it had graduated into something more lasting. She was holding a jar of blackberry jam and looking at me with careful recognition. It's Constance, she said. Constance Albright. Marcus introduced us last Christmas at the party at his office. I remembered her then. She was Dara's mother. We'd spoken for maybe 10 minutes over a cheese plate, and she'd been perfectly pleasant in the way people are pleasant when they're performing pleasantness rather than feeling it. I hadn't thought of her since. Of course, I said. Constance. She held up the jam. Blackberry. Dara won't eat it, but I love it. She said it the way people mention their children's preferences, casually, matter-of-factly, and with a small undercurrent of something harder to name. We ended up walking the market together. It wasn't planned. She just fell into step beside me and neither of us suggested otherwise. We talked about nothing important for the first few minutes. The weather, the preserves, a vendor we both thought was overcharging for honey. And then, near the far end of the market where the noise thinned out, she looked at me sideways. "I got an email," she said. I already knew. The way she said it. Not a question, not surprise, just a statement placed between us like an object on a table. "So did I said. She was quiet a moment. "I've been Dara's mother for 31 years. I changed her diapers and drove her to violin lessons and sat in the front row of every school play. Her father and I paid for 2 degrees and a down payment." She paused, and I got 3 sentences. We stopped at a bench near the entrance. The sky had gone pale and cool. A child nearby was trying to eat a cider donut bigger than his face. "I don't understand it," I said, because I didn't. "I do," Constance said. "A little. Dara has always wanted her life to look a certain way. Clean lines. No complications." She turned the jam jar over in her hands. "I think she loves Marcus. I do. But I think she loves the version of herself she becomes next to him more. And that version doesn't have a mother who asks hard questions or a future mother-in-law who teaches piano lessons in her living room." I felt the sting in that. Not from her, from the accuracy of it. "She told him to send the email," I said. It wasn't a question. Constance met my eyes. "I believe so, though he agreed to it, which is its own thing." We sat there a while. 2 women who had been quietly removed from a story they'd spent decades helping to write. "Are you going?" I asked. She almost smiled. "I've been asking myself that since Tuesday." She looked at the child with the donut. "What I keep coming back to is this. I carried that girl into the world. I have a right to be in the room when she starts her marriage, whatever she decides about me afterward." A pause. "You should come with me." I looked at her. "I mean it," she said. "You're the groom's mother. I'm the bride's mother. Between us, we're the whole story. They can't pretend we don't exist if we're standing right there." I didn't say yes. I also didn't say no. I told her I'd think about it, and I meant it. Though the truth was that part of me had already started deciding the moment she sat down. That night, I took out the dress I'd bought 2 months ago when Marcus first told me about the wedding. I'd been so pleased when I found it. Dusty rose, tea-length, with a small pearl button at each wrist. Elegant, but not trying too hard. I'd even found shoes that matched exactly. I'd thought, foolishly, that Marcus might see me in it and feel proud. I thought a lot of foolish things. I put it on and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I'm not a small woman, never was, but I've made peace with that. My hair has been white since I was 58, and I stopped fighting it because Raymond always said it made me look like a professor, which I took as a compliment. In the mirror, I looked like exactly what I was. A woman who had raised a son alone after her husband died, who had worked and saved and loved without conditions, and who had been told in 3 sentences that she was an inconvenience. I took the dress off carefully, hung it on the door. I didn't sleep well that week. I kept having the same waking thought. What kind of mother shows up where she hasn't been invited? And then, almost immediately, the answer. One who was supposed to be invited in the first place. Constance texted me Thursday. "Just still thinking. I wrote back to dress is hanging on my door." She replied, "Mine too. Navy blue. I'll drive." Marcus called that Saturday. It was the first time I'd heard his voice since the email. He sounded careful, the way people sound when they've rehearsed something. "Mom, I just wanted to make sure you got our message." "I did," I said. A beat of silence. "It's a small ceremony, very intimate. We wanted Marcus." I kept my voice level. "You don't have to explain it. I understand what the email said. We just didn't want any tension." I turned that over. Tension. As if my presence were inherently volatile. As if I were the kind of woman who made scenes. I have never once caused tension at any event in my life, I said. I brought a casserole to your college roommate's funeral. I wrote a card for your boss's retirement party. I drove 6 hours to sit in a plastic chair at your work conference 2 years ago because you said it would mean a lot to you. A pause. I am not a source of tension. I am your mother. He didn't answer right away. Dara just wants the day to be. I know what Dara wants, I said. Have a good evening, sweetheart. I hung up. Then I sat down at the piano, the old upright in the corner of the living room, and played for an hour without stopping. I don't usually play for myself anymore. It's something I should do more often. The morning of the wedding, Constance pulled up at my house at 9:30. She stepped out in a deep navy dress, structured shoulders, low heels. She looked composed and entirely herself. You look wonderful, she said when I opened the door. So do you, I said. Come in for coffee first. We sat at the kitchen table, the way women of a certain age do before important things, quietly, with something warm between our hands. I want to say, Constance began, that whatever happens today, I'm glad we're doing it together. So am I. She set down her mug. Whatever Dara feels about me after this, I need her to know I was there. That I chose to be present over chosen to be comfortable. She looked out the window. I spent too many years choosing comfortable. Me too, I said. We drove to Cedarwood, the venue Marcus had mentioned in passing 6 months ago. A restored barn property outside Nashville, white fences, rolling hills, the kind of place that looked like a wedding was its entire reason for existing. Constance knew the specific location from the invitation she'd received and then been subtly encouraged to decline. The parking area was already lined with cars. Guests moved along a gravel path toward the main building. The women in pastels, the men in summer suits, even though it was October and the air had turned. It smelled like hay and chrysanthemums. No one stopped us at the entrance. No one asked for names. We walked in the way people walk into places they belong. Not quickly, not aggressively, just steadily, like we knew where we were going. The ceremony was still underway in the main hall, the doors slightly open. We slipped into seats near the back. I saw Marcus at the front, standing straight in a charcoal suit that had clearly been carefully chosen. He looked handsome. He looked like Raymond at 32, which made my chest ache in a way I hadn't expected. Dara was walking down the aisle. She was beautiful in the way she always was. Precise, deliberate, everything exactly where she wanted it. Her dress was simple and perfect. She was looking only at Marcus. She didn't see us until the ceremony ended. We were standing near the back when her eyes found us during the transition to the reception. I watched her process it. First Constance, then me. Her expression moved through several things quickly. Surprise, calculation, something close to alarm, and settled into the smooth composure of someone who had rehearsed for interruptions. She came toward us, with Marcus half a step behind. Mom, she said to Constance, her voice pleasant and absolutely controlled. I didn't know you were coming. I know, Constance said simply. Dara's eyes moved to me. Margaret. A pause. Marcus sent you a message. He did, I said, and I thought about it very carefully. I looked at my son. He had the expression of a man watching two weather systems approach each other. Marcus, you look wonderful. Congratulations. He blinked. Mom, This isn't a confrontation, I said quietly. I didn't come here for that. I came here because I'm your mother, and weddings are events that belong in a person's memory for the rest of their life. I intend to be in yours. Dara placed her hand on Marcus's arm. This isn't the place. It's exactly the place, Constance said, her voice gentle but immovable. Dara, I'm not here to disrupt anything. But I am here, and I'd like to think we can find 2 chairs and spend the afternoon being gracious to each other. A long moment. the kind that has entire conversations inside it. Enjoy the reception, Dara said, and turned away. Marcus lingered a second longer. He looked at me and I saw something move behind his eyes. I wasn't sure if it was guilt or relief or both. Then he followed his wife. Constance touched my elbow. Well done. My knees are shaking, I murmured. Mine too, she said. Come on, let's find those chairs. We found a table near the side windows that no one had claimed. The reception was beautiful. I'll give Dara that. She had an eye for things, for how they should look and where they should go. The centerpieces were simple and seasonal. Small pumpkins and white roses together. The lighting was warm. A string trio played in the corner. A woman about my age stopped at our table. She introduced herself as Marcus's former supervisor. A woman named Linda who'd mentored him in his early career. She'd heard I was a piano teacher. My granddaughter just started lessons, she said. How do you handle the ones who don't want to practice? Patiently, I said, and with a lot of easy songs they already like. She laughed and sat with us for a while. It was the first real conversation I'd had all day, and it steadied me in a way I hadn't expected. Later, a teenage boy wandered over. He turned out to be Dara's cousin's son, maybe 15, lanky, with the particular awkwardness of someone who'd been dressed up against his will. He looked at our table like it might be safer than wherever he'd come from. Can I sit here for a minute? He asked. Of course, I said. He sat. Looked around. This is really fancy. It is, I agreed. He glanced at me sideways. Are you Marcus's mom? I am. A pause. I am the game. I heard right. He thought about that. So why did you? I considered the question seriously, the way I would with one of my piano students. Because some things matter more than being comfortable, I said. And because I raised that young man up there, and I wanted to see the beginning of his next chapter. The boy nodded like this made sense. My dad doesn't come to my soccer games anymore. He says he's busy. He picked up a cocktail napkin and folded it in half. But I think he just doesn't want to. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it, the full weight of it. He shrugged in the way teenagers shrug when they're trying not to show something. It's fine. It wasn't fine. We both knew that. I let it sit without patching it over. For what it's worth, I said, the fact that you notice, that it matters to you, that's not a weakness, that's just love. He looked at me for a second, then away. Okay. He folded the napkin once more. You seem like a good mom. I felt that land somewhere deep and quiet. I try, I said. He wandered off eventually. Constance had watched the whole exchange without comment. When he left, she said, You're good with young people. Piano lessons, I said. You learn patience or you find another job. The speeches began after dinner. Dara's maid of honor was funny and warm. Marcus's best friend told a story about a camping trip that made everyone groan and laugh. And then Marcus stood up. He looked out at the room with the expression of a man who had prepared something and was suddenly uncertain whether it still fit. I want to thank everyone here, he said. This day it's been a lot. He paused. His eyes moved across the room and found me, just for a second. I want to thank the people who shaped me, not just today, but all the way back. Another pause. Mom. His voice caught slightly. He cleared his throat. Mom, thank you for teaching me that showing up is the whole job. The room applauded. I pressed my lips together and breathed. Constance put her hand over mine on the table. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Dara did not look at us during the speech. But afterward, she didn't ask us to leave either. Near the end of the evening, as guests began gathering coats and making the slow farewell orbits around the room, Marcus appeared at our table alone. He pulled out a chair and sat without asking. I owe you an apology, he said. I waited. I knew you'd want to be here. I told myself it was easier this way, that it would keep things smooth. He looked at the tablecloth. That was a coward's logic. It was, I said. He nodded. I'm sorry, Mom. I know you are. A silence. Dara, he started. I don't need you to explain Dara to me, I said. She's your wife now. I respect that. But Marcus, I waited until he met my eyes. I am not something to be managed around. I am your mother, and that is not something you get to file away when it becomes inconvenient. His jaw tightened, then released. No, he said quietly. It's not. We sat there for a moment the way people do when the hardest things have already been said. The speech was beautiful, I said finally. I meant it. I know. He stood, leaned down, and hugged me. It was brief and real, the way hugs are between people who aren't performing. When he straightened, his eyes were wet. I'll call this week, he said. I'll be home, I said. He went back to his wife. I watched him go, the broad shoulders I'd watched grow from nothing, the walk that still had Raymond in it after all these years. Constance stood and gathered her wrap. Ready? Yes, I said. The drive home was quiet. The roads out of the property wound through dark hills, the headlights catching the reflective eyes of something small in the brush and then losing them again. The radio was off. Do you think she'll change? I asked at some point. Constance considered this honestly. I think she might soften. Over years, with children maybe, if they have them. She kept her eyes on the road. I think the more important question is whether we'll spend those years waiting for her to. No, I said. I won't. She nodded. Good. She pulled into my driveway just after 10. The porch light was on. Inside, my piano was a dim shape through the front window. Tea? I offered. She came in. We sat in the living room with mugs of chamomile and the comfortable silence of women who have been through something together and don't need to narrate it. You know what I kept thinking? I said after a while, when that boy sat down at our table. What? That no one warned us. That the hardest part of loving children isn't when they're small and need everything. It's when they're grown and decide they don't need you. And you have to figure out, without any instruction, what love looks like when it isn't needed. Constance was quiet for a moment. I think it looks like tonight, she said finally. Like showing up anyway. Like sitting in a chair no one pulled out for you. I looked at the piano. Raymond had helped me move it into this house 30 years ago. He'd complained the whole time and then played 3 songs badly once it was in the room, just to make me laugh. I'm going to be all right, I said. I know, she said. So am I. She left around 11. I locked the door, hung my coat, and stood in the middle of the living room for a moment. The dust settles differently after a hard day. Everything looks the same but feels slightly rearranged. I went to the piano, sat down, played nothing particular for a while, just let my hands find what they wanted. Eventually, they settled on a hymn I hadn't played in years, something Raymond used to hum while he made breakfast on Sundays. I didn't rush it, I just let it go where it went. 3 days later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Then a second message. Hi, this is Tyler, Dara's cousin. I was the kid at your table at the wedding. I looked you up. You teach piano? My mom says I can take lessons if you have an opening. I read it twice. Then I smiled. The first real smile since before the email. I have an opening on Thursday afternoons, I wrote back. See you then? Marcus called that same evening. The call was awkward at first, careful, both of us feeling our way along an unfamiliar path. But it was real. And when we hung up an hour later, I felt the specific relief of something beginning again. I didn't hear from Dara. I didn't expect to. Not yet. Some bridges get rebuilt one plank at a time, and sometimes the other person isn't ready to pick up a hammer. I could wait. I was good at waiting for things that were worth it. What I was done waiting for were the things that weren't: permission, apology, acknowledgement. I had shown up to that wedding in a dusty rose dress with pearl buttons, and I had sat in a chair no one offered me, and I had watched my son get married, and I had heard him thank me from a podium in front of everyone. That was mine. No email could take it back. The following Saturday, I drove out to the farmer's market again. The maple was still amber, holding its color one last week before the wind would take it. I bought jam and late-season apples and a bunch of dried lavender from a woman who'd grown it herself. On the way back to my car, I passed the bench where Constance and I had sat. I stopped and looked at it a moment. Then I kept walking. Not every place needs to be revisited. Some are just where things begin. Thursday arrived. At 4 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Tyler stood on my porch in a jacket his mother had clearly made him wear. He had sheet music tucked under one arm and the expression of someone who wasn't sure this had been a good idea. "I've never taken lessons before," he said. You said showing up was the whole job." I held the door open. "Then you're already ahead of the curve," I said. "Come in." He came in. I showed him the piano. He sat down and looked at the keys the way people look at something they don't yet know how to love. "Where do we start?" he asked. "At the beginning," I said, "like everything worth doing." And we did. If you've ever been left out of a moment you deserve to be part of, I hope you know that your presence is not something anyone gets to permanently take from you. You are allowed to walk through the door. You are allowed to take up space. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up quietly in the dress you already bought and let your existence speak for itself. If this story meant something to you, share it. Someone you know might need the reminder.